poker must defend itself against real-time assistance now, otherwise it won't be here in 5 years' time. Not anything like it is today, at least. This is probably the biggest threat to our game that there has ever been.
I think a good topic would be game integrity also, because I understand you're making some strides there, and there seems to be more hope for players in that realm. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, for me, game integrity is one of the most interesting areas of online poker. It's something that I've worked in pretty much my whole career. So my first job out of university was with PokerStars. And I started in the customer support team there, and I, as part of the role, was looking into collusion cases and sort of later got trained on the bot detection tools as well. So I've worked in game integrity for a really long time, and I've seen it evolve. And so I would kind of characterize it as an arms race, right? Because the online poker site has a really strong incentive to police the games, make the games safe, right? Not a foolproof incentive, and we can talk about that later if you want, but a strong incentive, particularly for things like collusion. And we in those early days we were really concerned about collusion. We did a lot of work to prevent it, to deter people from trying to collude in the first place. We built a whole bunch of tools and really invested in people and training and everything to make it to make collusion go away, and it pretty much did. This is one of the things that people don't realize. Like the games today, you can't get away with colluding at any kind of scale. Like you can't cause significant damage on a reputable online poker site by colluding now. It's just too easy to catch. The game changer was big data. Prior to big data and the ability to analyze big data, collusion was an arms race. Then as soon as we got big data, it just became instantly obvious. And once we got big data and we found the right way to interrogate it, it became instantly obvious who was colluding and who wasn't. Right. So it's kind of like a solved problem now. I challenge anybody to get away with colluding at scale on Stars or WPT Global. So we've changed our focus. We're now concerned about different things, and actually the thing that's been concerning people like me in poker for the last sort of 5 to 10 years maybe is what we first called push this button bots. So obviously we've had the concept of bots around for a long time. Bots take the decision for you, and they take the action for you, right? So you leave them undisturbed, and they just do
RTA, basically.
Yeah, exactly,
right.
RTA.
It's very similar.
RTA it's the same concept. The decision is being made for you, but there's a human at the controls. So our early bot detection efforts relied on being able to distinguish between a human at the controls and a machine at the controls, and we did a lot of stuff to distinguish the two, some technical stuff and other stuff. But as soon as you put a human at the controls, all of that goes out of the window. You can't rely on that anymore. So it became a more difficult challenge. Now, luckily, in the early days, RTA was really bad. Like, the very first RTA was really weak tight and would give you terrible advice that would cause you to lose. So why would you use it, right? And generally, like people who did use it, they experimented with it and very quickly found it was terrible and didn't continue using it. So it wasn't a threat, didn't really cause any damage. But today, RTA, with advances in GTO and solver technology and stuff like that, even a couple of years ago, it wasn't really feasible to run a lot of GTO simulations in real time quickly enough to be able to tell the player what to do. The technology wasn't powerful enough to be able to respond quickly enough to give you the decision in time to take the action at the table, right? But now that is possible. It's possible both locally, and it's possible using pre-solved databases online. And
I have a question about that. and we'll get into the defenses against that. But I know actually a little secret that I will not reveal now because it's meant to be confidential. But there's one major player that is going to really knock out a lot of RTAs pretty savagely. But I want to ask the question: what are the methods people first ask the question? What are the methods people are using for RTA and things like that? And for the record, I do think that RTAing is technically cheating. It's not the worst kind of cheating, obviously, but it definitely is worth the relatively severe penalty, especially if someone is caught, because it's very hard to catch. Kind of a parabolic penalty. It should be like some kind of major fee or something. But I want to, yeah, you said people use lots of databases or something. I would presume that people use like the major solvers and stuff as my guess and just have like a laptop open, like, because, I mean, common sensically thinking, how the do you catch that? But do you guys have some insight on what people do? Or, I mean, do you even like maybe just some of the basic methods that are a little bit more obvious and if they're preventable?
Yeah, so I mean, the most entry level way to use an RTA while you're playing would be to just use a solver. And I don't want to name any particular solver because some of them are very cooperative and are trying to help us with this problem. I'm not saying this is a solved problem. This is where the arms race is today, right? So the arms race has moved on from collusion, and it's moved on from bots as well, actually, for the most part. And RTA is the cutting edge of game integrity today. And the most interesting part of the arms race today. But yeah, like if you're an entry-level cheater and you want to use the RTA, then the typical way to do that would be to find a solver, familiarize yourself with using it, and then enter into the solver difficult situations that came up as you played. Now, obviously, you're going to rely on a lot of assumptions and things like that. But that's entry-level way. There are obviously much more sophisticated ways to use RTA. I'm aware of at least one group that was able to use pre-solved scenarios. So instead of solving the situation on the fly, which is very resource intensive and slow, they would look up the most analogous similar situation in a database online and get the result in, say,
is there a way to prevent against that? Because, like, I mean, at some point, I just want to throw this out there. At some point, you would think like the person who's like investing a lot in cheating and trying to get better and better at cheating would think like, what if I just got like really good at playing? I think because that's a lot of work too. Like, go down the rabbit hole of cheating and be like, and try to come up with all these sophisticated methods. Why don't I just like get good? Like beat things normally. You know what I mean? That's one thing I think is funny because they have to get more and more sophisticated. But I'm curious if there's defenses against these kinds of things because I know that some of the at least the basic methods are going to get at some point.
for sure. Have you ever played backgammon? Are you a backgammon player?
I played it a little bit. I played like yeah, I played it a little bit. I know there's like a pure total solve for that.
Yeah, so the story with backgammon is backgammon went through a brief explosion online, and at the same time, solvers became a thing in backgammon. Very similar time. So the most famous solver in backgammon was called Snowy, and there was another one, a GNU BG it was called, which was open source and like ridiculously hard to use. But Snowy was very popular. So what happened in backgammon was the explosion happened online, the explosion in solvers happened at the same time, and the backgammon sites couldn't fight quickly enough to save the game. So the game of backgammon has pretty much died out online. It's still there, but it's very niche. Nobody's really playing it for significant money. There's no enormous multi-billion-dollar backgammon sites like there used to be. So backgammon failed to defend itself against real-time assistance. Poker must defend itself against real-time assistance now, otherwise it won't be here in 5 years' time. Not anything like it is today, at least. This is probably the biggest threat to our game that there has ever been.
Really? I didn't know that shit.
Now, I don't want... Some of this is really, really sensitive and confidential, so I don't want to get into too much detail about it. But there is one thing, this is like one tool in the toolbox, which is very analogous to the backgammon situation, that they basically came up with too late in the game. So what they did was the backgammon side started solving every game. Because Snowy would always solve a position in the game the same way. In backgammon's a much simpler game. You don't have to make the same assumptions about what your opponent may do. You just assume your opponent's playing GTO as well, and there is one choice which is clearly better than the others usually. So these just solved every game and compared each player's actions against Snowy and GNU BG and looked for similarities. So if you saw somebody who was constantly making the same move as Snowy, well, they were obviously using Snowy for advice, right?
Right.
So backgammon's very much like that. Like the beginning of the game and the end game they're relatively simple, and there are a relatively small number of decisions to make, and generally those opening moves are really well understood and the closing moves are really well understood. So most good players will play the same moves in the same situations, in the opening and the closing. It's the middle part of the game that's the really difficult part, and that's where the edges are gained and lost. And a blunder at that stage of the game can make a massive difference, can make a massive impact. So that's where it's most important to compare what a player is doing to what the solvers are suggesting that a player should do.
Sure.
So yeah, I mean that is one approach that can also be applied to poker. You can partner, for example, with the makers of solvers, GTO Wizard, for example. We have a partnership with them where we collaborate on this kind of challenge. This is one tool in the toolbox, and the rest is really cutting edge and proprietary, and I don't want to talk about it really, but we do have some really good so we have some good tools in the toolbox, and we have some really interesting high potential ones on the way as well.